How is everybody today? All right, we're going to get started. Today is day 2 of our Crossroads sew-along. Today we're going to talk about how to put the blocks together. But before we get started, I wanted to go over a few little housekeeping things to ask. We are going to do a blog post at the end, for probably the first week in July, about the sew-alongs. And what I'm going to ask of you is if you've got your blocks made or your quilt top done or your quilt finished, send me pictures before June 26th to be considered to be put into the blog. I want to show people what you guys have been doing and how much fun it's been. And there might be some giveaways if you send in pictures, so let's see how it goes. But if you take pictures even while you're sewing, just send me some pictures. Let me know how it's going. Let me know if you're enjoying this. And that would go for Crossroads or Down the Rabbit Hole. It doesn't matter which sew-along you're doing. We're going to do one blog covering both. The next thing is I'm looking to do my next sew-along because I've had a lot of fun with this one. And we're going to do it on Zoom, I think, because then we can interact in a video. So I have to work out the logistics of that, which I will have done here in a few weeks. But that quilt I want to do is called our Dutch Wonderland quilt. And this quilt pattern is showing fabrics from Clothworks. We also did this quilt out of Very Bright Basics from Anthology, and I was out online. If you search Dutch Wonderland, Heidi Pridemore, you will see both versions. You'll see this version and the Bright Batik one. Both of them, there are people all over the place selling kits if you want to join me. It is a quilt that has 8 different blocks in it, so we'll do a block a week, and we will at the end have enough blocks to do this quilt, which is 100 by 100, or you could just make one of each of the blocks, duplicate 4 of them, and have enough to do a quilt like this size. So you wouldn't have to make a very large quilt if you don't want one. But more details will be coming in the group on Dutch Wonderland, so stay tuned. And any questions on your cutting or sewing this week? All right, what we're going to do today is I'm going to go over how to make your blocks, how to sew all the pieces together for the blocks. This is what I call the O block, and then what did I do with it? Oh, there it is. The X block of the same thing looks like this. So if you look, I'm going to pin it on our quilt as a design wall. This is the X version, and this is the O version, and you'll see how the blocks are being formed. So on one, the pink is in the center, and the teal owls are on the outside, and then in this one, the teal owls are the inside, and the pink are the 4 corners. And this is how I paired up my fat quarters. That being said, you can mix it up. You can have pink owls with teal feathers, and then the white owl in with the pink. You can mix them up. I kept them in pairs because it made life a lot easier. So for today, I'm going to pan the camera down so you can see what I am doing as I talk through how these blocks go together and give you some pointers on how to sew them. And then you'll be ready to finish your blocks for next week when we'll go over the quilt layout, and hopefully between now and then I'll get the piece border that I was going to try to do with the remnants finished. So this is going for a ride. We're going to turn you down. We are set and ready to go. So again, last week we talked about 2 different ways to cut the blocks. To cut your pieces, you could do the traditional method where we were cutting the squares and we were going to mark on either side and then sew and get 2 half square triangles. Or you could have used my Pac-Man ruler or the non-slip multi-size 6-inch Flying Geese and 90 45-degree triangle ruler to cut your pieces from a strip. Doesn't matter how you did it, we're going to go over both. The purple thing. So the first method was to cut the 4 7/8 inch squares. So, all right, so we cut the 4 7/8 inch square, And you're going to take one of the print squares and one of your background squares and you put them right sides together, and then you have to mark your diagonal. So traditionally you would mark the diagonal by taking a ruler, laying it on it point to point, and drawing a line. And this method of point to point and drawing a line, so it would be like this, and then you'd sew a 1/4 inch on either side. That way isn't super accurate to me because you're picking 2 points that are floating and you don't use any of the other edges to align it. So it will work, but again, I like this other way a little better because it's more accurate. So if you were to, let's just flip this guy over. If you were to have a Pac-Man ruler or any ruler that has a 45-degree angle and a 1/4 inch in there, there are some like folded clip-in corner rulers are the same, though they may not be big enough. There are several 45-degree rulers out there. This is not the only one. It's the one that I like to use. But to do this, I use the ruler and I line that flat top edge and the side edge with the ruler, and I draw my first line. And I'm using a Frixion pen that will iron off versus using like a Sharpie that's permanent, because this is now my sew line. It's not my, I'm not sewing a 1/4 inch away, I am sewing directly on that line. That will get me the one triangle. I flip the whole thing over and I mark this side. Make sure your ruler is on straight. Another way to check that is there's a dotted line right here. That dotted line should be on the point. That's how I knew I was off, because this was up. So there are those. You would then take this to the sewing machine and sew on those drawn lines. Once you've sewn on the drawn lines, which is here, can't see it that side, I've sewn on these drawn lines, then you're ready to cut this apart. And you're just cutting the seam allowance, so you don't have to be super accurate, but you need at least a 1/4 inch of a seam allowance. So if everything has worked out right, you should have the ruler on the dotted line, on the sewn line. The edge should go from point to point, and you should be able to just cut these apart. And now you have 2 half square triangles. I would press these towards the dark, and that will leave you with, press it towards the dark, it'll leave you these little dog ears. Let's get this out of the way. And you always want to trim those dog ears off, because they can cause your needle to bounce when it hits one. It makes it harder to quilt your quilt. It's just some excess bulk that you don't need in your quilt. So there's no rules to quilting, just suggestions, but I highly suggest cutting the dog ears off because it will make your life so much easier. I know it's time consuming and people don't like to do it, but if you have a lot of them, you can also stack them up. Let's just finger press these open. What I like to do is I'll stack up 4 or 5 at a time, and I'll take my scissors and I'll roughly cut them off, because again, this is not an accuracy thing, we're just trying to get rid of the bulk. So that is the traditional half square triangle, all finished, pressed and clipped, and he's ready to go into our block. Before I jump over to the block one, I'm going to show you the ruler method, which has less steps. So hang on just a second. These are the traditional. Here is the ones I've cut from the strip. So if you didn't catch that in the last video, I had strips of 4.5 inch fabric. I took my Pac-Man ruler, laid it on, let's get this to go right. So pretend that was a whole long strip. I laid this on and I cut them off. I layered them up background to print fabric so that when I cut it, it was ready to just go right into the sewing machine. And then once you get it to this point, you just have it, you sew it through the machine. You use your 1/4 inch edge along the edge of the triangle and you sew a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and that will give you this finished sewn block. Alright, so once you've sewn your 1/4 inch away, then you would again press this towards the dark. But when I cut with the ruler, You cut this, you don't have a dog ear there. You would have a dog ear there. I just flip it over and cut that off while I'm cutting. So then when I go to sew, I don't have to trim all those dog ears. They're already removed. So that is the quick and easy method using the ruler. So we have all of those. So the two different blocks in the quilt are coming from the same units. So let me pull one of these over. So you have your 8 half square triangles, 4 4.5 inch squares, and 1 8.5 inch block. These half square triangles are sewn background to background for this block and this block, which makes our life a lot easier. So we can then take these out. We can, before we worry about how to assemble our blocks, we can then go ahead and match these up and sew them for all the blocks background to background. So I usually would set these up like this, and I do this every time I piece for no matter what I'm doing. I lay them all out and I lay them on a big ruler like a tray, and I will lay everything out at the cutting table or sitting in front of the TV if there's a lot of them. And I'm sure, oh, there it is, he has to be sewn. And I layer them up, and then I take this to the sewing table, the sewing cabinet, and I go ahead and sew them. What this does is, one, it lets me see that everything is wrong side up, so I have everything layered right. And two, I'm less likely to like turn this and sew it like this. Sew it this way and have an error. It's not foolproof, but it definitely cuts down on my errors by just taking a few minutes to lay out all my pieces on a ruler, and I take them over to the cabinet and I slide it off and just sew through those. So that is a trick that I do for all piecing, but definitely is helpful for this one. So once you have all your flying geese sewn together, let's get to that sample. So once you have these sewn together, then we can figure out which way we want to lay our blocks. The quilt is made up of, let's use the picture. The quilt is made up of 6 O blocks and 6 X blocks. So from each pair, one will become an X block and one will become an O block. And how you make an O block is you sew the flying geese on each side, background towards the center. And you're gonna, for either one, move that down, you will take 2 of the flying geese and sew a square on each end. That becomes your top and bottom border for all the blocks. So before you actually get to this part, you can sew all your flying geese, you can take 2 of the flying geese and sew all your 4-inch squares. Then you can figure out which way you want to lay out your blocks. If they're going to be O blocks or X blocks, they both don't have to be, you don't have to do one of these O and one of these X. If you lay it out and you like the way it looks and 2 of these have to become O's, do it. It's your quilt. But for O blocks, you sew flying goose to either side. Then you sew this on the bottom and you sew this on the top. That will get you the O block. For the X block, you're going to rotate this way, this way, this way, and this way, and that gets you your X block. So that's the beauty of this pattern, is you can do a lot of the pre-sewing before you get to the block assembly. Now what I was saying is you could mix them up, and even though I paired these to these, you could take this guy out and throw this guy in and mix up your pairs if you want your quilt to be more random and less the same, mirroring each other. And that's totally up to you. But I want to talk a little bit about how you sew these things together. So when you go to sew your flying geese together, you align them right sides together. I like to start at the top. Where's my stick? Let me rotate this so you can see it. I like to start right up here, where this is the hardest part of sewing. Down here it's going to just align, it's just background, it's flat. So I worry about getting this part first correctly, because it's easier to correct down here if you decide to veer off or something. And you want your 1/4 inch seam to go through both the background and the triangle right at that point, so that when you open this up, there is a 1/4 inch of background from the top of your flying goose to the edge of the block. So that is what you're trying to get, is a 1/4 inch from here to here. You obviously want it to be rectangular and you want to have a 1/4 inch seam, and then I just press it to one side. You could press these open if you wanted to have less bulk up here, but it's so little, I would just press it to one side. Once you've made all your flying geese, then you sew your square on, and again you want this intersection to be a 1/4 inch from the edge, so that when you open this up, there is a 1/4 inch. This is a little wider. Don't look at that one, look at this one. 1/4 inch from the point here to here, because that is your sewn line and you don't want to cut off or have a floating point. So 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. Once you have those sewn, then when you go to sew these on the square, the background is very easy. You don't have to worry about anything. But when you do the X block, when you just put these guys towards the center, you're going to want to hit, you want everything to align, and you want your 1/4 inch, your needle to hit right here, which is a 1/4 inch from here, and that will give you a crisp, sharp point on your block. So here's this one. Now, I'm going to show you this one because that's a nice sharp block point. That one is not. It's about a 1/16 of an inch off. I'm not going to worry about it. It's just such a little bit. I'm not going to worry about it. It looks great. From a distance, it looks like an X block. So you don't have to be perfect, especially if you're just starting to learn how to sew. Try to just do the best you can and move forward versus getting hung up on the tiny little details that once this is quilted and washed, you're not going to see it. So that is how you sew the X block and the O block. And let me tune up here. All right, so any questions on how to sew the X or O block now that I have your comments and can see you guys? So good to see you. For next week, we're going to go ahead and talk about quilt top assembly, the border. For this class, there's only 3 sessions, so next week is our last session. And we're going to talk about some quilting ideas for it as well, and any questions you guys have. And if anybody shares pictures with me this week of the Crossroads, I will try to get those printed out so I can share them with everybody next week. Or better yet, share them in the group and just tag it Crossroads Sew Along so everybody knows what you're doing. And I hope you have enjoyed the first 2 weeks. All the videos are being cleaned up and reposted because Facebook does flip the video on me, so I'm mirror imaged in their video, and their video quality isn't the greatest. So tomorrow there'll be a cleaned up version of this video posted for you. Also, if you have friends that are like, oh, I wish I was doing that, I'm sorry I missed it, which hopefully there are lots of friends, you can hop over to YouTube and go search the Whimsical Workshop. That's our channel. You can subscribe to our channel, which will then let you know every time we put up a new video. But we did just post the fabric video there, and the first week of sew along classes are up there, so your friends could go to our YouTube channel and follow along. Same for you. If you don't want to get into Facebook and into the group, go ahead and just, subscribe and check them all out over there along with all the other videos. So I do a lot of quilt samples. We do a lot of pattern designing for the industry, and what we've started is every time I'm sewing that, I'm doing a video sew along all in one video. So there's a couple over there right now that you can also check out. So if you've enjoyed doing our projects and you've enjoyed hanging out with me, please go check that out. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you like and subscribe below. You can find the Whimsical Workshop on our website, thewhimsicalworkshop.com. And that has all links to all of our other social media platforms. Thanks for joining us.